breakfast cereal, milk, orange juice, toast. You think that's what a healthy breakfast looks like because it's what breakfast has always looked like. It hasn't. Before 1900, the average American breakfast was meat, eggs, lard, heavy food, high calorie, built for agricultural labor. Nobody was pouring flakes into a bowl of cold milk and calling it a meal. The idea that a bowl of processed grain with milk constitutes an adequate morning meal was invented, deliberately, by a man in a Michigan sanatorium who believed that grain-based food would suppress sexual desire and cure masturbation. That is the origin of your breakfast. His name was John Harvey Kellogg. He ran a health resort called the Battle Creek Sanatorium in Michigan. He was a Seventh-day Adventist who believed that diet could suppress sinful behavior. He was experimenting with grain-based foods for his patients in the 1890s. He accidentally discovered that wheat berries, when cooked and then passed through rollers, could be pressed into thin flakes. He fed them to his patients. He thought of it as medicine. His brother Will Keith Kellogg saw it as a product. What Will Kellogg built from his brother's medical experiment was not just a company. It was an industry. And the industry's first task was not to sell cereal. It was to convince an entire nation that the food they had been eating for breakfast for generations was wrong, and that a bowl of processed grain was the correct substitute. That campaign reshaped American eating habits permanently. And it was never about health. John Harvey Kellogg was one of the most peculiar figures in American food history. A physician, a Seventh-day Adventist, a dietary zealot who believed that the human body was a temple that could be purified through the right food. The Battle Creek Sanatorium, which he ran from 1876, was not a hospital in the conventional sense. It was a health resort, a place where wealthy Americans came to be treated for what the era called dyspepsia, nervousness, and moral weakness. Kellogg's treatment protocol involved vegetarian diets, exercise, abstinence from alcohol, and an elaborate system of beliefs about the relationship between food and morality. He believed meat stimulated passion. He believed stimulating foods led to moral failure. He believed the solution was grain, bland, fiber-rich, minimally processed grain that would quiet the body's appetites. In 1894, Kellogg and his brother Will were experimenting with wheat in the sanitarium kitchen. They were attempting to create a soft grain-based food for patients with poor dentition. They cooked wheat berries, left them overnight, either by accident or by design, accounts vary, and then ran them through rolling machines the following day. The dried wheat came out as thin, crisp flakes. Kellogg served them to his patients. The patients liked them. So much so that former patients began writing to the sanitarium requesting to purchase the flakes after they returned home. John Harvey Kellogg filed a patent on the process in 1895. He intended the product as a health food, a medical intervention. He had no intention of commercializing it as a mass-market consumer product. His brother had entirely different intentions. Will Keith Kellogg spent years as his brother's subordinate, managing the sanitarium's business operations while John Harvey received the intellectual and medical credit. The relationship was complicated and often fraught. Will understood commerce in a way that John Harvey fundamentally didn't. Will saw the flaked grain product and understood immediately what it could become. He wanted to add sugar. John Harvey refused. Sugar was a stimulant. Sugar defeated the entire medical purpose of the product. This disagreement defined the history of American breakfast. In 1906, Will Kellogg founded the Battle Creek Toasted Corn Flake Company, later renamed the Kellogg Company. He produced corn flakes, not wheat flakes, to avoid direct competition with his brother's sanitarium product, and added a measured amount of malt flavoring and sugar to the formulation. The sweetened corn flake was not a health food. It was a palatable convenience product for mass-market consumers who would never have consumed the bland, unsweetened grain product that John Harvey Kellogg intended. Will Kellogg's genius was marketing. He understood that the product's medical and moral backstory, its origin in a sanatorium, its association with Seventh-day Adventist dietary reform, was simultaneously an asset and a liability. It lent the product credibility and health associations, but it also associated it with dietary restriction and illness. His marketing strategy stripped the medical framing and replaced it with vitality framing. Cornflakes were not food for sick people. They were food for energetic, healthy Americans who wanted to start their day with a clean, light, modern breakfast. This is one of the most consequential repositioning decisions in American food history. Before Kellogg, Americans ate breakfast without thinking much about what breakfast should be. It was regional. It was economic. It was whatever was available and filling. In 1906, Will Kellogg spent more money on advertising than any food company in American history to that point. A full one-third of his initial capital was allocated to a single magazine advertisement in Ladies' Home Journal. The ad ran nationally. Sales exploded. This was not incidental. Kellogg understood that he was not selling a product. He was selling a behavior. He needed to change what Americans believed about what morning eating should look like. His advertising campaign made several simultaneous arguments. That a heavy breakfast, meat, eggs, fat, was sluggish and unhealthy. That the modern American needed a lighter, cleaner morning meal to be productive. That corn flakes, with cold milk, provided exactly this. And that the correct breakfast was a specific ritual. Flakes, milk, perhaps fruit, consumed quickly at the start of a busy day. Every element of this argument was manufactured. There was no scientific consensus that a heavy breakfast was unhealthy. There was no evidence that grain-based cereal produced superior morning energy compared to eggs and meat. The entire healthy breakfast narrative was a marketing construct designed to create demand for a product that had no existing market. Kellogg created the market by creating the need. He told Americans that they were eating breakfast wrong. And then he sold them the correct breakfast. This is the same strategic move that Listerine used to invent the concept of bad breath as a social problem. The same move that Schlitz made when they became the first beer company to advertise brewing cleanliness, implying all other beers were dirty. You do not sell a solution to an existing problem. You define a problem and sell the solution simultaneously. Will Kellogg's success did not go unnoticed. Charles William Post had been a patient at the Battle Creek Sanatorium. He had come to Kellogg's facility seeking treatment for a nervous breakdown. He observed the sanatorium's grain-based food program. He did not recover through Kellogg's treatment. He credits his recovery to his own faith-based healing practice. But he left with something equally valuable, the commercial concept of breakfast cereal. Post founded his own company in Battle Creek in 1895. He developed Grape-Nuts, a dense, baked grain product that bore no grapes and contained no nuts, but was marketed as a brain food with quasi-scientific health claims. He then developed a cornflake product he called Post Toasties, in direct competition with Kellogg. Post's marketing was even more aggressive than Kellogg's. He made specific medical claims, that his products cured appendicitis, could restore failing eyesight, and treated malaria. These claims were entirely false. They were also effective. The Battle Creek breakfast cereal industry exploded. By 1902, there were more than 40 companies producing breakfast cereal in Battle Creek, Michigan alone. The town had become a factory for a product category that had not existed commercially a decade earlier. This is how food categories are created. Not through organic consumer demand. Through corporate competition in a market one company manufactured. Post and Kellogg together did not just compete for cereal sales. They competed for the definition of what breakfast was supposed to be. And in doing so, they produced an advertising volume so large, so consistent, and so nationally distributed that the concept of cereal as morning food became culturally installed in a single generation. The cereal industry's second major corporate manipulation was the children's market pivot. By the mid-20th century, the original health framing of breakfast cereal had begun to weaken. Americans were eating more protein-rich breakfasts again. The market needed a new engine. The industry found it in children. And in sugar. The children's cereal category, which Kellogg's and General Mills developed aggressively in the 1950s, reversed the original health positioning of the product entirely. Fruit Loops Sugar Frosted Flakes. Lucky Charms. These products were not health foods. They were candy-adjacent products specifically designed to appeal to children's preference for sweetness and parents' desire for a quick, easy morning meal. The cereal companies deployed the same cartoon mascot advertising strategy that we have covered with Honey Nut Cheerios, Tony the Tiger, Toucan Sam, the Lucky Charms Leprechaun. Characters designed with specific child psychology parameters. Advertising timed to Saturday morning cartoon blocks. Messaging built around the nag factor. But here is the layer that gets overlooked. The children's high-sugar cereals were sold alongside the adult health cereals in the same product portfolio by the same companies. Special K on one shelf. Sugar Smacks on the next shelf over. Same company. Same retail presence. The brand equity of the health products provided a halo that shielded the sugar products from scrutiny. Kellogg's was simultaneously the healthy breakfast company and the manufacturer of cereals with more sugar per serving than most desserts. Both identities served specific commercial purposes. The health brand recruited adult shoppers. The sugar brand recruited child shoppers. Together, they dominated the cereal aisle. The cereal industry's most sophisticated corporate maneuver was vitamin fortification. Beginning in the 1940s, Kellogg's and other cereal manufacturers began adding synthetic vitamins and minerals to their products, primarily B vitamins, iron, and eventually vitamin D. By the 1950s and 1960s, cereal boxes were covered with nutrition information and vitamin content claims. This created a circular argument of extraordinary commercial power. Cereal is not nutritionally dense in its natural form. Corn flakes, stripped of their grain's natural bran and germ during processing, lose most of the vitamins and minerals present in the original corn. The processing that creates the flake is the same processing that removes the nutrition. Manufacturers then add back synthetic versions of the vitamins that were removed during processing, at a manufacturing cost of fractions of a penny per serving, and market the resulting product as nutritionally superior to less processed alternatives. Part of a complete breakfast, the phrase that appeared in virtually every cereal advertisement from the 1950s onward, was a legal and marketing construct. It acknowledged that cereal alone was insufficient, but it positioned cereal as the centerpiece of the breakfast table, surrounded by milk, juice, and toast, all of which the cereal brand benefited from by proximity. The fortification scheme also provided regulatory cover. When consumer advocates or government agencies raised concerns about the high sugar content of children's cereals, the manufacturers could point to the vitamin and mineral additions as nutritional justification. The iron fortification in sugar-frosted flakes was used as a defense against the argument that the product was nutritionally empty. The added nutrition was real. The manipulation of its context was deliberate. The American breakfast was not discovered. It was invented. By a man in a Michigan sanatorium who thought grain would cure moral weakness. By his brother who added sugar and spent a third of his capital on magazine advertising. By a competitor who watched from a hospital bed and decided there was money in the same idea. The breakfast you grew up eating, the cereal, the milk, the juice, is the endpoint of a marketing campaign that began in 1906 and has never really stopped. Every element of it was designed. The health associations were manufactured. The child-oriented products were engineered for maximum sugar response and minimum parental resistance. The vitamin fortification was a regulatory defense strategy dressed as nutritional concern. John Harvey Kellogg wanted to save souls. Will Kellogg wanted to sell product. Will won. And what he built was an industry that generates approximately $15 billion annually in the United States, not because grain flakes with cold milk is the optimal morning food for a human body, but because 120 years of coordinated advertising convinced 2 generations of Americans that it was. The cereal in your cabinet right now is not tradition. It is not health. It is not even particularly food in the way that eggs, meat, and whole grains are food. It is the most successful marketing campaign in the history of the American morning. And it started with a man who thought breakfast could cure sin. Let us know in the comments what we should cover next. Thanks for watching.